Hello friends, Tanya here with another fun crafty video, and today we are doing day 5 of the Spellbinders 2024 Crafty Advent Calendar. Opening door number 5. It is long and narrow, and it looks like it is some swirly squiggles dies. There are 2 dies in this package, and they are going to make some really fun squiggles. Once I get these out of the package, you can see they are not identical. There are 2 different patterns of swirls. One is just a little more tightly packed than the other. These are kind of like coils. And you could use these as streamers or decorative details, all kinds of things. I die cut them from some silver glitter cardstock from the silver assortment of the treasured cardstock. Love that stuff. We're also going to play with some new stuff from Simon Hurley. This is the inspired card stamp set. There are coordinating dies created, and we're going to use some VersaFine Clair ink here in Warm Breeze, Paradise, and Purple Delight. These are some of the newer colors, and you can get these ink pads at Spellbinders and at scrapbook.com. And a few other places, I'm sure. We're going to take these 2 paint swoosh paint lines. These are, I don't know if they're swooshes. They don't have a curving swoop to them, but they are like you took a paintbrush and dragged it across the paper as you were rotating the paintbrush, and it has this fun artistic bend to it here. I've cleaned the Purple Delight off. I'm sliding my cardstock up the Misty here a little bit, and then we'll use the Paradise, which is this deep royal blue here. Applying good pressure, and you can see that one inking creates a beautiful solid image. I do love that about VersaFine Clair inks. They are crisp and they are a pigment, so you can heat emboss with them if you'd like. They are not alcohol ink friendly. And they usually only, as long as it's well inked, if your ink pad isn't dry, it's going to take just one stamping to get a nice solid image. This is the Warm Breeze. This is also giving you a good look at the different colors. Look at that vibrant collection of colors. There happen to be coordinating dies for these paint brushing strokes, and I die cut all of those. And now we're going to take the elephant from this stamp set, and we're going to use some Hero Arts Intense Black ink and this scrap of cardstock. Just going to make sure I have this even with 2 sides of the Misty, because I'm going to come back after I have alcohol marker colored the image, and I'm going to stamp it a second time. I am going to use Toner Gray 6 here, so T6 as my darkest color, adding those to the areas that are going to be shadowed. Trying to be kind of careful with how I place this so I don't get the dark gray on any of the areas that are going to be lighter. But this is a fairly forgiving image. And the artist does a pretty good job of lining things or showing us where the darker areas would be. Next, we're going to use the T4, and you can do lightest to darkest if you're starting out with alcohol markers. That is often the easier way to go because you have a little more control with it, because once you lay the dark color down, you can't take it completely back. You can blend it in a little more, but it is easier to start with your lightest. Our lightest gray is going to be the T2, and I'm going to cover even the insides of the ears, which I'm going to bring a pink into in a little bit. So I'm using this lightest color to blend all 3 of them together. And here we have RV52, and that's what I'm going to add to the insides of the ears. With animals that are gray, or actually a lot of colors, I like to lay down a light color of whatever their fur or skin is, and then come back over it with the pink, because that helps blend it better with that creature. Next, for the tusks and the toenails, we're going to use W1 and then a little bit of W0. I did add some W0 to the paint palette. I do ultimately change that. And then I found a spot that I missed on the paint palette. That is the hole. You're going to be able to see the elephant's arm through that. I decided to come back and use E21 on the areas that are wood-like and for the bristles of our paintbrush. And then I am using some vibrant purples. I think this is VO5 and VO4 is what I'm using for my purples. And they are a little, one is more red tone and the other is a little more blue tone. I wouldn't say that they're actually different variants of the same color. I come back and I add some blue and kind of an aqua teal to the paint palette. And then I'm going to work on that little tiny painting on that easel. We've got a tree and I'm creating two different blue portions to the back. Now to the metal part of the paintbrush, I'm going to add some of this silver Wink of Stella, which I've had in my stash forever. You can use whatever you have that's easy to use. Next, I'm going to put this piece of clear acetate into my MISTI and do a stamping of that image so that I can lay the acetate over the image to make sure that it's lined up appropriately before I commit with my VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink and stamp over our finished image. And you can see that it did line up perfectly. Next, I'm going to take some clear embossing powder and sprinkle that over our image because I want to use my heat gun and create a nice raised shiny impression, there we go, of the outline of this image. And you can just see that coming to life here. There's something magical, as we all know, about heat embossing, and for me it was the gateway into paper crafting that blew me away. There is a coordinating die for this elephant, so we're going to run that through our Scout. I love having this little die cutting machine on my desk and that it's big enough to take more of the dies than the Sidekick did. This will cut so many of the dies. I did take the scrap of that and I'm cutting 2 extra backers there. Next we're going to cut some more of those little swirly dies, the border dies here, because I'm going to need, I think I ended up needing 8 of them in total. So I went ahead and cut all the extra curly cues that I needed. Now when I take them out of the die, you do have to poke the centers out of your little swirls here. I'm just using my pokey tool and poking all of those out. It goes pretty fast. And then we're going to use the Cameo frames. This came out this summer and they're absolutely stunning. This is sized for a 5x7 card. So I have a 5x7 card base here and I'm going to create a shaped card. I'm taking this largest die and hanging one side off of the folded edge before I run that through the die cut machine. And it cut through all of that. I'm using my platinum. I have the 8.5 inch wide opening one, the big one, and I love that. It gives me some versatility in orientation of die cutting. You don't need the larger die cut machine in order to do this, but if you have the space and the money to purchase the larger of the die cut machines from Spellbinders, I highly recommend it. I've had mine for years and it has taken quite a beating and still works fantastic. It just makes it easier for you to do larger cards with smaller supplies. Here I have a 5x7 piece of cardstock. Now in retrospect, I would make this a slightly bigger piece of cardstock because that large frame from the Cameo frames set is just a smidgen bigger than 5x7. So it worked great for my shaped card, but when I go to cut this out to be on the front of the card, it is just a little bit small. So I would recommend doing more like 5.5 inch or 5.25 inch by 7.25 inch, and then you'll be able to very easily get your die cut completed. So I'm taking the paint swooshes and the swirls here, and I'm alternating them on our cardstock. And as you can see, I do have to add a little bit of extra swirls, and it's very easy to match this up and extend your swirls on each segment, because I believe they're only 4.25 inch wide, and this is a 5x7 piece of cardstock. I am not running glue all the way along that swirly line. I'm just adding dots at the top and bottom of each of those swirls and in the center of the connecting swoosh between each, and actually goes pretty quickly. I'm using the same strip of swirls to extend the extra swirl on the cardstock all the way along, and I only took one extra strip to do that. Now I am figuring out, do I need the extension on this one? And no, I don't, because it's much narrower on this end. And as you can see, I alternated the direction that the swirls went. Wouldn't this make a great like cake slice, birthday cake, side of a birthday cake? I can see lots of ways to use this. Oh my gosh, so many cool ways. Here I'm trying to get this placed as carefully as I can so I get as much of this die cut as I can, because I figured it out the hard way, you know, after I did all the work. Now, one of the swirls, the paper did separate, the glitter cardstock did separate a little bit, but I'm just going to take that piece and I'm going to glue it right back over the top of the other layers of that cardstock. Very easy to fix. And you probably wouldn't even have noticed, but I did, and I had to fix it. Now we'll glue this piece directly to the card base. And at this point, I still thought I was going to do a portrait orientation for my card. But as I'm looking at it, I thought, you know what, this will look a lot cuter. It'll fit a lot better for the configuration of this card if I do a landscape. And it actually stands up very nicely as a landscape card. Just taking a look, making sure everything is nicely lined up, and laying our elephant on here to try to figure out what I want to do next to complete this card front. Now you can ink blend with the VersaFine Clair inks also. Pigment inks blend very nicely also. In fact, the hybrid inks that we love to ink blend so much with, it's the pigment portion that makes it easier to blend them, because if it doesn't soak into the paper, the pigment part, it stays on top of the paper, which is why it takes longer to dry, and it also blends together more easily because of that. Now I am doing the Purple Delight into the Paradise into the Warm Breeze, and look at that. I love when you can use your inks in multiple ways, and this way it's going to match perfectly with the rest of the card. All of your different elements will coordinate together. Once I had ink blended it together to make sure that these colors would blend together okay, I went back and blended a little more to get a little deepening of that blend and smooth it out a little more. Now we're going to use more components from the Cameo frame. I'm going to cut out this beautiful detailed part from the silver glitter cardstock, again from the treasured cardstock assortments. I'm taking the delicate part, the detailed part, and the oval to create a frame. You don't need the outer portion for this frame part, but I'm going to use that outer outline die to glue the frame to it, and that creates a wonderful backdrop. I'm just going to carefully pull that out of the glitter cardstock and poke all of these little bits out of our piece here. Of the specialty cardstocks, glitter cardstock can be the most finicky when it comes to getting the pieces to fall out with your really detailed pieces. So this is not unusual, and it's actually much easier to deal with the treasured cardstock versions. Tonic has good glitter cardstock. I haven't really worked with the Simon Says Stamp glitter cardstock, but I find that the Tonic and the Spellbinders glitter cardstock it die cuts beautifully, and it's easier to glue to other components and to get the fallout pieces from. Now we'll take this beautiful oval and we're going to adhere that to our ink blended panel. The contrast on that is quite stunning, actually. Here I'm dry fitting this all to decide exactly how I'm going to lay this together. I'm going to use my reverse tweezers to hold on to this frame. I add glue around that center oval part and then just dots of glue in various spots around the frame to try to keep some of those edges from being loose that you catch in an envelope as you take it in and out of an envelope. Just makes it a little easier when you're sending things. Now I'm going to use those side, center, or top and bottom, however you want to think of it, points, and a point on each side to make sure this is nicely centered on that background piece. I flip it over to get a good rub without catching any extra pieces and pulling them up accidentally. I have an extra piece of cardstock that I'm going to apply to the back of this Cameo frame, and then we'll adhere that to the front of our card. Just going to center this as best I can, and I end up using my grid mat a little bit to help me find center on here. All of these stripes are a little distracting and making it a little hard for me to eyeball it. Just looking at the different components here, trying to match up the frame with the inner frame. And now that I have that placed where I want it, I'm using a heavyweight block to add a little extra pressure. Now remember, the swirls are glitter cardstock, and those are a little harder to adhere to. And it's not all one smooth surface that we're adhering it to because the stripes are die cut, as are the swirls. I added a couple extra layers of cardstock that were die cut from the same die as our elephant. I'm layering those together and adhering that to the front of the card. And then for a sentiment, I am going to use a sentiment from the same stamp set from Inspired, and I'm using some black cardstock. I pre-treat it with my anti-static powder bag there, and I'm using some white pigment ink. This happens to be the Sharktooth White from Atelier, which I purchased through Trinity Stamps. There's also the Unicorn White from Hero Arts. Spellbinders has a white pigment ink. There are lots of white pigment inks out there. When I went to link them, a lot of them were out of stock. They tend to go out of stock quickly. They're a very popular item. So when you find one in stock, jump on it so that you know you have a white pigment ink in your stash. I did use some alabaster white embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. I really love the Brutus Monroe embossing powders, and this is my favorite white detail embossing powder. By using white pigment ink, if you have a little spottiness to your embossing, it disguises it a little bit because you've already stamped it in white. Now I am going to use another sentiment from the same stamp set for the inside of the card to get the powder off of my cardstock from the black. I am using my microfiber cloth, and then I think Jennifer McGuire used this trick. Use a post-it note to line up a straight edge for you where you want to die cut this. This way you don't need a die, and then you just line up the blade with the edge of that post-it note, and you have your sentiment strip die cut. I'm just trimming off the ends to make that the length I want, and that was a super easy cheat to make good straight sentiment strips. Perfect. I'm going to back this with some scraps of that same black cardstock, just using my pickup stick to help me deal with the little tiny pieces, and we'll trim off the excess. Now I'm just looking for good placement. We're going to set that next to our elephant, and you can see that the end of our banner hangs off of all of those layers. So I'm going to take more of those scraps of black cardstock, 3 layers, to add a little reinforcement behind or under the end of that sentiment strip. So I'm going to use my reverse tweezers to pick that up. I'll put a little glue on each side and then tuck that under the banner, smush it down, get good adherence, and that completes the front of our card. Inside the card, we're going to take our last strip of the paint swoosh. This one is in the, I think that's in the Warm Breeze color. And I'm trying to put this across the bottom of the card on the same, I'm looking at the way the symmetrical die cutting is and trying to make my ends land in the same spot on each side. I do have to trim off the excess later. And then we're going to take our last strip of loopy swirls here, and we're going to add that right below the paint strip using the same method of dots of glue to adhere that. I flip over the card base just to get a good rub on that so the pressure is nice and even. And we'll trim off the extra of both the paint swoop and the swirls here. Just carefully making sure I don't cut anything but the pieces that are overhanging. Now this is a little more challenging than if this was a rectangular card base, but that's okay. We're going to make it work. It's really not that hard. You're just following the edge of the card base. Next, we're going to take our sentiment for the inside, and this is the Stamp Wheel 2.0. This one has the advantage of the side that pulls off. So if you're using a piece of paper that is bigger than the stamp wheel, you have a way for it to hang off the edge of the platform. Now that I have my card base stuck to the sticky mat on the inside, which is quite the bonus there, I add my sentiment where I want it, pick it up with the plate, the stamp plate, and ink it up with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And I did think about stamping it a second time, but I got a perfect image the first time. So yeah, I'll resist the urge to add unnecessary ink because it would transfer to the front, to the inside of the other side of the card too. And this goes back together easily. And there is my completed card for day number 5. I really enjoyed this. As always, I love to play with my crafty things, and I am really enjoying the Crafty Advent Calendar. Leave me a comment below. Let me know what your favorite portion was of this, if you have the Crafty Calendar, or do you need to go buy it yet? There are still some available. If you're interested in any of the products I used today, check that description box below for the visual link list, and like, subscribe, all the things. Until next time, here are a couple more videos I thought you might enjoy. Bye-bye.